Greetings. This is Chipacon, and welcome to Otherworldly, the weekly show from the Changing Times, Changing Worlds Conference, which will be on this November. And we like to talk about all things having to do with the occult, divination, magic, complementary, internal alternative medicine, spirituality, ghosts and other supernatural beings, all kinds of things like that. Tonight we're going to be talking about, and I hope we get a lot of talking, so I don't want to talk for an hour, about the things that your kids learn when you're young. What I'm gonna hope you will chime in with the things that you learned when you were young, because a lot of what we learn before we becomes formative and we build on it. But people will come to Wicca or witchcraft or magic or psychic practice or manifesting New Age. There's many ways of dabbling in the occult that have to do, but you usually come as an adult, sometimes even middle-aged. But a lot of this is laid down on what your beliefs about the world are. And those beliefs are often set before you are 5 or 6, before you can remember. I don't know how back your memories go, but I only remember back to kindergarten. I don't remember when I was younger than 3. I don't remember much about before I went to school, but I do remember one of the formative things in my life was we were getting ready to go to church for Easter, and I was wearing a beautiful dress that I was so excited about. And I tried to tell people I remembered being with the people I was with in my grandmother's driveway, wearing that dress, and I could remember it. I was very clearly deja vu, which of course I didn't know anything about at the time. All I knew was that I remembered this, and all the adults were carefully telling me that that was impossible and I was just imagining it. And that was let me say, a Santa Claus isn't real moment for me. It's pretty darn traumatic when you discover that adults aren't infallible, because I knew what I'd experienced and they were all denying it. And that was a watershed moment for me. I don't know. There's something pretty powerful when you discover that this stuff is real. And when that happens, I should probably have that on me either. But I think that usually happens well after some of your core beliefs have been created. And we get a whole lot of that. I'd like to talk tonight specifically about the cartoons, the movies, the TV shows, the things that the superstitions that your family may have participated in. But a lot of the culture around us tells us how things are supposed to work, how magic is supposed to work. And that's what I wanted to talk about tonight, because there is an awful lot of that happens, and we see it. I went to a workshop once, a conference, I guess it was, run by Helen Berger, and I can't remember what the name of it was, but the keynote speaker was some witch who had been on a reality TV show where they throw everybody together for a while, and she talked about what it was like to be a very, very out in public witch. And other people talked about everything from pagan rock music, and I didn't know there were 15 different kinds of death metal, Harry Potter universe, all kinds of things. And I was very sorry that I had not put in a workshop. Yeah, Fiona, something, yeah. About the scholastic books that my kids were getting all the time, because that period of your life between, say, 10 and 15 is when you are beginning to realize that you do get to pick what you're going to believe. And so when you're reading these young adult books, when you're getting books from school, you're not just reading what your parents got for you. Whether it's Goosebumps, or whether it's Roald Dahl, or whether it's Disney movies, you are still laying down some of the magical foundations that you get when you get older. I know that my kids developed what I think was, and I'm sorry if you've watched a lot of these, you may have heard it before, but when Aladdin came out, my kids came up with a game that they used to play on the playground, and they called it the genie game. And the one person was a genie and the other people were all wishers. And the goal was, if you were a genie, to come up with a way of fulfilling their wish that would totally screw them. And your job, if you were a wisher, was to come up with a wish without, it couldn't be more than one long sentence, that the genie couldn't screw up. And I've always thought that that was really an exceptionally useful magical practice for anyone to try to, before you make a spell, for goodness sakes, figure out exactly what you're going to say, because the magic frequently will give you what you asked for, not what you were thinking about. And so, and that one, it had nothing to do with, well, the kids weren't doing it as magical practice. The kids were doing it because it was a fun game. But boy, is that a great intellectual exercise.
Oh, that's wonderful, because I've read more than one sci-fi / fantasy story based on the concept that somebody found themselves in a situation where they had like a wish to undo previous wishes, and the elaborate detail they had to go into to make it work was really kind of fun. And it does, yeah, you get what you asked for, not what you wanted. And this kind of reminds me of, back in my computer days, we used to refer to the DWIM chip. Do what I mean.
Yeah, which Magick doesn't do that.
No.
And I remember there was a girl that she had gotten so disappointed. She'd been burned so many times with love magic, which is why, you don't cast love spells. But she had said she was going to get really specific. And so she said that she wanted someone who was happy. She wanted someone who totally devoted for her, somebody who was physically fit and not sick all the time. Somebody said red hair would be nice, good looking. She cast the spell. She did not mention human. The next week, a beautiful Irish setter was given to her that was happy, totally devoted to it. and she loved it dearly, but the magic gave her exactly what she'd asked for, and she'd been very, very specific.
Yeah, and when you're very specific, you got to remember not to leave out details.
Yeah, and you can't remember all the details. You can never remember all the details. Friend of ours who had I think it was Connecticut, a cult shop, had somebody come in and say, I need it. Which book has a love spell in it? I want to cast a love spell. No, you don't. It's like, and she spent a great deal of time telling this girl, no, you do not want a love spell. And a couple weeks later, she came back and said, "How do you take off a love spell?" And she's like, "I just wanted him to not be able to live without me." Not be able to live without you. He's in the ICU, isn't it? Yes, he is. He's dying. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah. This, if you get to a bunch of magic users and ask for them to tell you stories about screwed up spells, you can get some really amazing ones. But tonight, I think I've talked about that, especially at Valentine shows. But tonight I want to talk about the rules of magic, such as are laid down in our freaking subconscious. And we're not going to be able to get past our subconscious. Just like the bigots of today can't get past what they were taught when they were 2 and 3, that Black people are supposed to defer to white people, or women are supposed to defer to men, whatever. And they can't get past that because they can't go back far enough. Knowing intellectually is still not good enough to get past those foundational beliefs. So I'm looking at some of the things that we read and heard and saw as children. I know in the 60s, we occasionally played that we could cast spells by wiggling our noses or bobbing our heads like Genie did. And that was games, and we understood that it didn't really work like that. But if you look at what you learned, what you bumped into, it's going to have an impact on your belief system. And I'm going to ask if somebody might have a something to throw in here. Keep doing that and try and get you. No.
Well, my background almost kind of ran to the reverse of that, because my parents were not the type who accepted or thought about magic at all. It just wasn't part of their reality. They were complete free thinkers and totally independent. But, I grew up as a kid who, in 1958, at the age of 8 years old, my father bought me a subscription to Popular Science magazine. I bought a copy of a special publication that came out celebrating International Geophysical Year.
Cool.
And if my mother picked up any of it from the South, she never said anything about it, never acted on it. And I never did quite figure out, with this huge shelf of books from book clubs, who was the one that loved mysteries and who was the one that loved Westerns. But I certainly didn't have any kind of immersion in magical thinking until much later in my life.
Kind of different being brought up Irish Catholic.
Yeah.
Basically, spell casting, if you consider going to church, lighting a candle, saying a prayer, putting a quarter in the box, and letting the saint take care of it. So since I was old enough to put the quarter in the little box in front of the votive rack.
Oh dear.
Yeah, well,
it sounds like you're paying for for wish fulfillment.
Yeah, well, think of it as
a sacrifice.
yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You throw whether it's money or blood or something, it's
Veneration, candle.
You have to pay for it. You can't.
Exactly.
It doesn't come free.
To quote Crazy Uncle Alistair, there is no magic without tears. There is no magic without blood.
Mm-hmm.
And
interesting, because you gave me another angle on my childhood, because we talk about, all right, people have grown up as like Catholic or whatever. My father was a lapsed Catholic from Reading, Pennsylvania. My mother was a lapsed Baptist from Durham, North Carolina. They got married in a Methodist church. If that doesn't give you a sense of where their heads were at about religion, I guess I grew up in that.
My mother taught me how to start reading palms.
Really?
Her mother actually read cards,
Mm.
regular playing deck. And she said she didn't know how to do it. Her mother wouldn't teach her because she read that this woman was going to pass away. And she said to the woman, it's probably a good time to, just take care of business and loose ends and wrap things, get things kind of tidied up. And she died in 2 weeks, and she never picked the cards up again.
Mm.
So I don't know where my grandmother got it from. My mother was kind of hush hush about it. Now, being a liberal in New York, she was probably connected to way more people than she would ever let on in public. She was an Eastern Star, but I don't see any particular magic involved with that. But I know as a kid, I was like 5, and she'd get frustrated at the red lights and says, "Yeah, well, why don't you blow the red light out?" So I just got to the point where I was good at it, and the lights would turn green. She'd start looking at me weird.
I did a similar thing with bugs. I was apparently a bug speaker. I would talk to bugs, and they would come. I would, could call them, or I could tell them be down by the lake and tell the what are those, the horse flies to buzz around my sisters, or of course when I was in a good mood, I could call the moths and to come out away to my hand, and I could take them out of the room. But I learned to point at somebody and say, stop, and stop their hiccups. Which really freaked a lot of people out. And when it got to the point where it was freaking me out, I stopped being able to do it. I think that there's a great deal of, I'm not going to say wish fulfillment, but the placebo effect, that we aren't able to do magic because we are told that we can't do magic. My kids are much better magic users than the average because they were brought up watching me do occasional magic randomly around the house to do things. And whether it's dowsing or whether it's healing, hardly a day goes by that we don't do things like that. And my eldest is she's a natural herbalist. I've studied herbs a lot, but she will go out and grab, she'll just go to my shelves and get, I think this and this and this. And then she will say, this is what I want to do. Are those right? And I will look at my book learning and I will say, yeah, that's exactly what I would have chosen. And so it kind of drives her crazy that she can do that, but she's also a natural, incredibly powerful finder. So I think it may be related to that. That once, if you bring your kids up so that they believe in this stuff, then you will be able to, they'll be able to do it. But, Mr. Rogers tells the kids, and I think his shows are still in reruns.
Yeah.
Wishing something doesn't make it happen. It didn't happen because you think about it, which was being said in regards to, you didn't get mad at your parents and now they're getting divorced, which is very important to teach kids. But at the same time, saying there is no such thing as magic from someone you trust so much is liable to.
I was a little heartbroken the day, I was a little old for Mr. Rogers. I was a little heartbroken the day that he showed the kids where the controls for the trolley were. because
I
I
missed that
thought,
one.
why not let kids keep their imagination, keep their belief a little longer, you know?
Hmm.
I didn't think Mr. Rogers was a show to do that.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
it's a matter of being able to suspend your disbelief.
Well, yeah.
And of course, you got major news outlets that make a racket at it. But
Yeah.
yeah, the thing is we can do the same for ourselves.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah.
well, I
And I
think
like,
you know what I'm saying when I talk about the discover that Santa Claus isn't real moment.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
is a pretty big trauma for most people when they discover that their parents have been lying to them, and
Right.
that the somebody does have to pay for the presents.
Hmm.
Right. And I know it fits in with my observation that the worst moment in any young boy's life is the day he sees his father make an obvious mistake. But, you know, you,
Yeah.
Mm.
When I was a child here in Syracuse, we had Captain Kangaroo in the morning, of course.
Yep.
And he never made any bones about it was a rabbit in a stuffed rabbit in a bed that he was using his own hand to move or anything.
Yeah.
It still had magical beings. Like there was something that Mr. Green Jeans had to climb a ladder to feed that you never saw.
mhm.
Mm.
But we also had a local production here in Syracuse called the Magic Toy Shop. There's a word right in the name.
Mhm.
And there was a magic key to open the toy shop door at the beginning of the show. Put your thumbs at the corner of your mouth and turn them up into a smile.
That's
And
cool.
they would use, well, if there was a actor who played the character of Mr. Trolley, who was a head with a kind of trolley mask headpiece on it. And Mr. Trolley was sometimes not available to work on the show. So instead, they would have the piano. He was also a piano player. They would have the piano play magically, and with children saying "Hocus Pocus, Dominocus, Abracadabra," and there you are. So I grew up literally in my single-digit years with magic being an everyday thing.
I
So
remember the first comic books I've ever bought. My father bought it, was the original Doctor Strange,
Oh,
and I absolutely loved it, and I could relate to it. And then they stopped printing them because I guess there were some years before they write more about them. And then he says, and then he looked at, well, he wanted me to be a kid because the thing is, I would read the encyclopedia and ask him about things from there, and he was just like,
Yeah.
he was looking at me, and I'm not right. So,
it's a long way.
he picked up a Ghost Rider comic, and I said,
yeah,
yeah, that's a
Oh,
little demonic looking, at that time, it's like, I don't know enough about any of that. But the funny thing is my mom had a resource and she never brought her for me. One day I was singing to the crows, and I will sing gibberish and whatever to the crows, and the crows would just congregate. And my mother's friend came over and says, um, don't do that. Don't sing like that now. Wait till later, and I'll talk. She passed away, but she said, and I remember going to her house, and I looked at the feather, and I says, "Is that a peacock feather?" And my mother goes, "Hush, hush! You don't ask about such things." And I'm like, "What's the matter with that?" And I remember Miriam says, "That's all right. You can ask me anytime." And I could tell, peacock feather was a symbol that you would put up in your house to identify that you're a witch, only to those who knew. That was a thing up in New England. And obviously,
Yeah, there you
my mother
go.
knew. Miriam was cool. She knew I had to shine, but my mom was freaking out.
The mother who taught you how to palm read.
Yeah,
Started
right.
to, yeah.
One of the things that I would it's always in fluctuation. I heard you don't bring peacock feathers in the house because that could attract death. But I'm sure it means 22 different things in different subcultures. But in the what is it? One of the things that goes on is the anybody remember the brouhaha about Ouija boards?
Yes.
Well, it is generally accepted that they are tools that are going to bring demons into your house, and they're the devil's talking board, and you should never do it. That never came up until the movie The Frickin' Exorcist came out. It didn't even come up when the book came out. But once the movie came out, well, everybody was sure that Ouija boards they had been using talking tables since the 1850s. This is just was not a big thing. Spiritualism at one point had, I think, 5,000 members as the spiritualist church. It was a practically mainstream church, and using a table to contact the spirits, not a big scary thing. And then they, of course, Hasbro got the rights to do the Ouija board, and
Yeah, my parents gave me
but
one as
then
a Christmas
the
gift in the
60s.
70s.
Wow, what?
My parents gave me one as a Christmas
Yeah.
gift in the 70s.
I got
Yeah,
one.
I got one. It must have been before I hit puberty. They gave me one for Christmas. My main
Okay.
objection to them, it is the supernatural party line telephone. You never know what's on the other end.
Okay,
Yeah.
show of hands. Who had a Ouija board when they were kids? Okay. Yeah, that was now how do I take that hand down? There we go. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
those hands.
People had Ouija boards, and that was just one of those things. How many of you had Zener cards? The
No.
little ESP
Nope.
Oh,
testing
symbols.
cards?
No, I made my own out of index cards.
Yeah, I bought some at one point when I found them, but my first set were definitely. I
was always reading books about this from the
the
library.
psychometry practice thing. You take a jar and you put it on. You find some kind of a cardboard base or something. Put a pin on it, and then you make a little fan. Cut out a circle, then put slits around it and twist them a little bit so that it'd be like a propeller, and you balance it on the head of the pin, which you got under then you put a jar over it, and that way you could know there was no wind going on, and you would practice telekinesis
Never
on the
heard of
jar
that one.
inside that. And that it's like, if you can turn that with your mind, I got some minor things with it, but I scattered enough that I never put a whole lot of effort into it.
I always liked working with
Played
the flame
with-
of a candle, and if I could make it go to one direction,
Oh yeah, candles are wonderful.
yeah, regardless of which way the breeze in the room might be or the draft.
Yeah. But you do think, when I first started what we now know as biofeedback, it was from some science fiction book that I had read, where the guy used biofeedback to lower his temperature, and I had a test I didn't want to take, and so I used my mind to raise my temperature enough so that I was able to skip school that day. But
Practical magic.
speculative fiction will inspire us to try a lot of things that we might not otherwise try. And I think that, okay, let's look at some of the basic children's magical area. You've got Narnia, you've got Neverland, you've got Oz, you've got Wonderland, and Middle Earth.
Yep.
The worlds of Christomancy, I think. Anybody know about the Chronicles of Christomancy?
Nope.
Diana Wynne-Jones, definitely good magic, good solid magic in that.
Okay.
Stranger in a Strange Land.
I liked Bob
Yeah.
Asprin's Myth Adventures book.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, I never got into
but
those.
he had him learning
Those
to
were good.
tap into lines of energy and pull on that to do things, and that is definitely
Yeah, the whole Thieves World series, just not Myth Adventures, but then, of course, that was the home of some of the best puns in fantasy fiction, like a story called Little Myth Marker.
Mhm.
And but Robert
but-
Asprin is one of my favorites.
yeah. And let's see. Okay, everybody, you just throw them into the chat room, and what the recommendations for books that you think
Mm.
I
and
can't remember.
then sure I can't speak and talk at the same time.
I can't much remember the titles. I just
Yeah, I can't remembering titles, remembering the
I was
names
reading a
of
lot of
authors.
Heinlein.
Yeah.
Heinlein had a lot of
And
interesting things.
I was heavily into science fiction at that time because my mother was. So
Yeah.
I already had the books and magazines coming into the house.
Yeah,
And I
what
would
my
just read
mother
what she bought.
had a lot of mythology books in the house, and I loved that. One aspect, and I'm not sure whether it's magic, but it certainly has to do with when you use magic as an older person. In the Roald Dahl book, Matilda, is it Matilda
Yes.
or is it? She tries to tell, the kids try and tell the adults how awful the teacher in the school are, and she said, parents don't believe things if it goes against what they believe. You can't have them. She can play shot put with a little girl by her braids, and she could tell all the adults she wants. Nobody's going to believe it and that's what happens with magic. Even if a kid does magic, then nobody is going to believe them. Yeah, Andre Norton's a good one.
Yeah.
Yep. We still have most of my Andre Norton books here in our library because, well, those that I didn't wear out.
As we do. The Arthurian legend, yes. I think that we all had a great deal of impact from it. I think we get a lot from Disney, but I mean, let's face it, Disney is
It's okay to talk about it in the form of reviewing it.
Pardon?
It's okay to talk about it if we are reviewing it, which effectively we are.
Yeah, that's essentially what we're doing. I don't think that they're going to, if we don't put it in the title, I don't think they're going to their bots are going to find us. But yeah, Disney taught us a whole lot of things. Disney's I think, very positive on much magic. Just as when it was the Wonderful World of Disney was on, they every once a month it was some nature documentary, which I always hated. Again, give me the adventures. I want the Zorro and the
that was more Mickey Mouse Club because
Scarecrow.
that tended to be the stuff that they would stick in between the Mouseketeers doing things.
But there were but in the movies, I mean, you get Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, but even now you get in Moana and in Lion King, You get some aspects of shamanism, the Princess and the Frog. You got the Mama Odie and the what was his name? Dr. Fessler, the Hoodoo Man.
Facilier.
Dr. Facilier.
Facilier.
Yes, French for the one who makes.
And the Shadow Man. And then there's you get well, the Aladdin, you get the genie who is like, how many people now, having been raised on Aladdin, are going to believe I can't make anyone fall in love with you? Ixnay on the more issues way, and I can't raise the dead. I can't, because and that's going to. I think there's going to be an awful lot of people who are going to take that as a absolute given. Same way people are going to believe no machine, no robot can ever hurt a person, because that's the first laws of robotics. It's like, excuse me, which of our programmers is capable of programming that in at this point?
Well, the new AIs, there's a couple AIs they shut down because they made the assumption that humankind is too bad and we needed to go bye-bye.
Right, and there have been some excellent books. My favorite is Robopocalypse, because it also presents an alternative scenario in which certain robots are imbued with something that couldn't count as programming, but somebody made a really good point in an article and said that if we can't develop a computer beyond a certain point, because we can't develop it beyond what we are capable of understanding. And if we could do that, if we can't understand it, we can't control it. And the whole theme of a sufficiently advanced AI deciding biological life is a virus is way too plausible.
We can't control the technology now to be done healthy for society.
Well, that's what's killing
How many
us.
of you watched National Geographic and watch all the rituals and ceremonies that people did in the tribes there, which fascinated me as a kid?
Well, we've seen a lot of those.
Well, National Geographic specials when we were a kid was another thing, Bill. The family watched them a lot. I don't remember so much the rituals and things.
There was a good deal of anthropology in there.
Yeah.
I remember in watching Survivor when they did it in the Yucatan in the Mayan area, and there was a bunch of people that gotten hungry, and because their scavenging skills were not great. And they were, hey, guess what? There's some local Mayans who are going to be doing a sacrifice at the temple. We're going to go film it, and you can come watch. And they went back and they said, they threw a chicken in the fire. Look, there's a cooked chicken there. We can go eat that chicken. And one of the nice guys, the ones we were rooting for, were like, that's a sacrifice. They gave it to the gods. You can't go around and eat their sacrifice. Not to mention, they threw a whole, it was a chicken, and the burned feathers and the cooked with the entrails still in it, like ick. But
they were that hungry, yeah.
But you don't steal from the gods. And then they did it anyway, and the people that we liked said, no, I'm not gonna do that. But then the skies opened and there was a downpour, and the rain fell on the just and the unjust alike.
Yeah.
But they were kind of wondering, is there a connection between this downpour? But so you can collect anecdotes from anywhere.
Oh, yeah. Well, I keep thinking you talk about the chicken and the fire, and I keep thinking about one of the recurrent themes in Hinduism, which kind of spills over into Buddhism, is they talk about eating the fruits of sacrifice, which is a big moral question, because if you put something on the altar and the gods don't consume the physical portion, is it okay to take the physical portion and feed it to the priests or whoever? And some doctorate level academic brawls have spilled out over the years about this,
Mhm.
because it really raises an interesting point. It's like the communion wafer.
Is it
You
a
know,
sin to
is it-
waste food?
Well, it's a sin to waste food. And does the god even want to eat the physical portion? Or did the
Mhm.
god take the spirit portion and leave the physical portion behind?
Mm-hmm.
And boy, there's a whole lot of knotty questions tied up in that concept.
Well, there's a lot of
if you
evidence
look at
that
the
that sacrifices at a lot of the Roman and Greek temples and elsewhere, that the food is eaten. Even some of the voodoo stuff, it's eaten. Not all the sacrifices are evos. Yeah, there are a whole bunch of them. You know, they're left out in the
Mhm.
wilds or wherever they're designed to go, and they stay there. But other things, yeah, you sacrifice a goat, you're using the blood. You're using the rest of the food though. So it really depends on the cult and practice,
yes,
and
Yeah.
in some cases, indeed, they the divine or entities actually leave some sort of essence of themselves in the food. There's some sort of power exchange.
Mm.
Yeah.
But if you get a bunch of academics who are doing it purely by semantics and philosophy, that's never going to answer anything.
I think that the what are they? The Shinto will take, when they're having they'll put it on the ancestor altar, and then they will take it off the ancestor altar to the table, and the ancestors have blessed it and taken what they want, and
Mhm.
and everybody eats it. In big Hindu ceremonies, people will bring flowers and candy and milk and whatever, and they take it up and they give it to the priest. And then the priest on the other side is taking food off the altar that has been blessed and gives it to the worshipers to eat and to take the flowers home that they're taking home blessed on. People are giving a sacrifice, but they're getting it back. And so it's, I think that was pretty well established. And I loved the story from the African missionaries when they were saying, "Oh, you're so dumb. You put the food on the altar and it doesn't get eaten. And see how silly it is. Obviously, there's no that you have, your gods aren't real." And they like, who taught you theology? They don't eat the they don't eat the
I have
physical
talked
part.
to a Catholic theologian who's fairly conservative, and the mass amount of Catholic priests and whatever, they're not taught the actual theology behind it. There's all this exoteric theology that does not fit the Pelagian Mysterium ways of looking at things. I mean, I'm a pagan, and then he says, we're trying to, so what's the point of talking? And it's like, I by most views, I'd be condemned to hell. And he says, you have morals? Yeah. You abide by them? Yes. And look, we can have this conversation in the afterlife. And I says, that is not what the church teaches. He says, that's the exoteric part. The esoteric part, yeah, that's what the Collegium Mysterium holds. And I'm like, that's interesting. So what's the youngest experiences you guys have had of anything paranormal or supernatural.
Oh, I already I did that. I told you some of mine. Come on.
I was a little bit
Carla,
late.
can you remember?
Hmm.
I was late coming in. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I know. Well, the thing is that we have them. I remember once teenager, somebody who was low on energy, so I put my hand on the back of her head and pumped energy into her, and she's like, "What did you do? I felt like there's fishes swimming in my brain." And like I just put some energy in because you needed energy, and that was completely untaught. I didn't get that from anything that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
But I
and
had learned to push energy around
all right.
along the way. And
My memory doesn't hold anything much paranormal in my early life, and I think that's really just the nature of my environment and the nature of myself. That it was probably there, I just didn't perceive it. I was much more involved in practical, hands-on stuff because, like, my father owned a gas station, and I worked there since I was like 7 years old. So I was more deeply immersed in the concept of changing tires and doing, filling cars with gas. And when I did start to drift off into my own interests, I spent more time doing chemistry at home than anything. I spent, just about every nickel I could get my hands on to add to what had to be the world's greatest chemistry set. So I don't know really, the whole concept of actually tuning in to the paranormal is something that came very late simply because the intellectual part of me was just going great guns and there just wasn't space for it. So I don't think I ever denied it, but
I was 7. My father passed away 2 weeks earlier. I came downstairs and I heard his shuffling feet in the little section where he stayed. It was actually I was actually sleeping in his bedroom. The bed was moved differently, and he actually came downstairs and walked down and said, "So long, Sonny," and then he evaporated into some motes and dust, and that pile of motes eventually evaporated as well. And of course, that gave my folks a whole bunch of stir and upset them quite a bit.
yeah, that would do it.
Yeah, I think I was exploring the occult and the supernatural more at like as a teenager. And I mean, my father gave me a deck of tarot cards. It was my first one that he bought at a yard sale. And he would give me books about numerology and other occult subjects. They basically supported my interest. I can't confirm that I had any particular experience for the longest time. More as an adult, I think. And I mean, I as a teenager, I'm pretty aware that my friends were pushing the planchette around on the Ouija board, for instance.
Well, it's interesting because
I longed for something I could feel was real experience.
I think for me, the turning point was somewhere in the early 60s. I had been picking up some noise about different things. And then we had somebody come into town who was a disciple of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was actually doing transcendental meditation studies. And I got involved with that. And that was my first concrete experience with meditation. And even after I kind of drifted away from that corporate concept, I still found it a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was the point where I opened up to things that were, outside normal physical reality. And
Mm.
I've been working on it since then.
Anyone here seen a ghost when they were younger or as an adult?
I think I have. I used to see. I used to go. I was college age, but hanging out with college kids, but wasn't in college. And sometimes after the late movie on campus, we'd go walking in the cemetery adjacent to the campus, and I'm sure I saw things. I'm not sure I could define them very well.
The definitions
back,
are what trips us up.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Looking back, I feel a lot of plausible deniability for some of the things I thought might have been ghosts. For instance,
Well,
one
I
time I was
remember-
walking to the library in winter, and it very snowy street, and my one foot landed on the street, and I slid on my heel, leaning back all the rest of the way across the street. And I could swear I felt pressure in the center of my back, like holding me up.
So you didn't fall.
I didn't fall. But I also realized that something like that, probably the muscles in the middle of my back contracted.
Well, yeah. I had one experience when I was still living at home with my parents, and I don't remember how old I was, but I was fond of wandering around, and I like to go out at night. And one time I was kind of wandering around the house, and this was well before the neighborhood got built up. And I suddenly felt a presence. And I finally identified it as a shape moving through the woods nearby. And it was totally creepy. I had no idea what it was, although first thought was Jersey Devil, but I decided I was going to go back inside the house at that point. But that was just something weird out of nowhere.
Yeah, there's besides ghosts, fae. I know a few weeks after my grandfather said goodbye, I would have these images of what looked like very skinny, human-shaped werewolves with red eyes. It was in the dark, and I could see their outlines and whatever, and they were just staring at me out of curiosity. I was a bit unnerved, obviously, but it wasn't until I got the book on fairy faith from Dr. Evan Wentz, like in my 30s. I finally got my hands on that book, and it describes noggins to the T.
Oh, really?
They are type of creatures that inhabit watery, boggy woods. Just on the other side of the street from our house was a watery, boggy woods. So
Okay.
it took me decades to get an actual name to what they were. But yeah, I got his first book when I was 13 or 14 on Tibetan yoga. And that, meditation didn't seem like it was something that could be outside of a Christian venue. So, it's just a tool. So I managed to be able to get my hands on that book. And that taught me meditation and some energy exercises to begin with.
I was
But-
heavily, yeah, I was heavily interested in divination, so I would look into different things like numerology and tarot cards. I didn't do much with it because I was one of the kids who didn't have friends at school or in the neighborhood. So who was I going to read cards for? And it, my life was pretty much the same every day. I did look into a lot about reincarnation. I would have dreams that seemed to have no possible place in my real life. And I would wonder if they were past lives. And then there's just an awful lot of the magic in my, first half of my life seemed to be more in the matter of, you can't always get what you want, but you get what you need, and you get it when you need it. And so things would flow a certain way for me. I was not always able to take advantage of that. I am a late diagnosis autistic, and I know that I made bad choices a lot of the time. I was afraid of choices a lot of the time. People didn't offer me the opportunities I could have had because they perceived me wrong. All this time I was still believing and still trying to do what I could. I do have confirmed episodes of telepathy with a friend when I was about 18 or 19.
Yeah, we did it then. It was the occult explosion in the 60s. Is there anybody here who's younger? Because I'm hearing a lot about people who are. I mean, I may be on the higher end of it. I'm 70 now, but
I still got you beat by
there
2
gotta be
years.
people who are. It's got to be different for people who were raised, in the 80s, in Generation X, the millennials. They were exposed to different things when they were growing up.
More
Yeah.
big movies that relied on magic and things, yes.
Yeah, it has to be very, very different, because I think about, I once had this little timeline, if you want to call it that talked about some of the really fundamental differences between the generations of my family. My father never knew a world without radio. And I never knew a world without television. My brother never knew a world without spaceflight. How does that change your perspective when you grow up with these different things?
Yeah.
And I realize this concept of this person has never known a world without X.
Yeah.
So
it's I think that is the kind of thing. When I was growing up, and the books that I read were, a lot of them were the books that had been my grandmother had bought for my mother, and they were good books, and I had the Little Colonel, and the kids read the Babysitters Club.
Oh my goodness, Little Colonel.
But it occurred to me as I've been rewatching, I had a bone to pick with almost every Disney movie that came out, because I'd read the books, and it's like, that's not, you screwed up Pinocchio, you screwed up the Jungle Book, you screwed up a Snow White, you screwed up Beauty and the Beast.
oh yeah, really.
They screwed up Swiss Family Robinson.
And then I used to read Swiss Family Robinson every year. It was, but at some point you come to the point where you say, it is a good thing by itself. It doesn't have to be what the book was.
It's different, yeah.
Right.
And
I will remember, though, that the most astonishing movie I remember watching was in the 60s, and it was Failsafe. I don't know if people remember that.
Yep.
About a colossal screw up that
Yep.
sends us off to bomb Moscow, and we can't stop it. And I went back and borrowed the book out of the high school library, and I was astounded to find the same story.
Oh.
Yeah.
A faithful.
How often? So they made a movie out of that was faithful to the book, and every bit as chilling.
Yep.
I kind of wonder if they had how many people do that? They will see a cool movie and then go find the book on, you watch, I don't know, Aladdin or
yeah, I don't know,
or the some of the early Harryhausen movies, and then go back and watch the and read
the book,
The 1001 Nights, and discover, hey, they have sex in them and stuff.
Right. And,
But-
and it's
Yeah.
also like you read the novelizations of some things, and that to me had a huge impact in my early Star Wars days, because first of all, I read the novelization of the original movie, where you got to hear a few things. Then
Heck,
you
I
had
read
the
that 2 years before the movie came out.
and the other one that really blew my mind was one written by Alan Dean Foster, which is so not canon, you can't believe it. But it's still an utterly fascinating book called A Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
That
one's
was
kind of
actually
famous.
that one was almost canon. That was the alternate if Harrison Ford didn't want to return to do the second movie.
Oh,
That would have been the second movie,
okay.
because for a while Harrison Ford was he didn't always want to be the wisecracking guy in the cool car, which is what he did
From American
in,
Graffiti.
right. So there was some question as whether he was coming back or not, and that it would have been an entirely different.
Oh, good
Franchise,
Lord.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I read Splinter of the Minds. Every Star Wars fan rather did
Yes.
at the time, because
Well,
it was the
among other
one
things,
other book.
Well, there's that. But I was just so astounded by how different the story was. I said, theoretically, same universe, but oh golly.
would have gone an entirely different direction.
But imagine if Han Solo had not been a character after the first story,
Oh,
you know?
I would have loved it.
that's a stretch.
Interesting concept, but
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting really close because Star Wolf is about to run off and have dinner. I know
Yeah, I'm
this.
afraid so. I'm afraid so. We are reaching
Right.
that time where I am going to have to say
Right. So
bye-bye.
you're going to have to bail. So we're going to say
Yep.
good
So
night
this
to
is
you.
where
Good night.
we're just going to ask if there are any other things people want to throw in. We've gone far and wide from where I learned magic when I was a kid, because I really thought there was going to be a lot more of picking up from laying down foundational facts from movies, but it's entirely possible that in this particular population, we got our magic from inside and
Mhm.
sought out the right books and sought out the things
And
that we
other
need to
and
find.
other sources,
Yeah,
or started later. You know,
yeah. I
didn't
was
learn
always
that.
surrounded by stories and shows that were using magic in a casual way, and it just was a part of the world for me. I had more of an interest in nature at the time,
Yeah.
but magic is part of nature.
Yeah.
And to extend what Bill had to say a few moments ago, we have never known a time without magic, any of us.
No.
Right. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, that sounds like a really great place to end.
Okay.
And we will invite everybody to come back next week when Star Wolf will be talking about being a male witch and breaking those stereotypes. Because
I want to hear about that.
yeah, it's going to be a fun thing. Bring your questions. Bring your friends and who are male or female witches, and we are going to push
or other.
Thank you. Oh yes, and this is where I remind people that the conference will be November 7th and 13th to the 13th this year, and it'll be weekdays in the evenings and all day, not all day and all night, but all day on Saturday and Sunday. And the registration is open, and so please go and look at the website and register, because it's going to be virtual again this year. Okay, that's it. Thank you for listening. Tell your friends about this.
Mhm.
And